Welcome, everybody. This is Joy again. We're going to mostly, hopefully, keep you guys muted, and you can write in questions or comments, and because I can see the chat area, and if you want to be unmuted, just occasionally do that. We can be pretty relaxed and see how it works here. But basically, this is orientation for people, even if they've already started taking classes. Anybody that's registered since last September when we had the in-person orientations. We had two of them, one here in Barre and one in Rutland. It's actually a requirement of the program from our funders that we have orientation. It's a little bit counterintuitive if you've already started the program and already in it, but this is a good way to just make sure that you know what your requirements are and different ways to reach them. I know sometimes I don't talk that loudly, so I'm just going to check. Is it can people hear me okay? If you can't, just type in, and I'll try to move the mic or speak louder or. Okay, sounds perfect. Okay, so thank you all for joining us. You probably know the certificate program. I'm just going to briefly go over the purpose of it. It's really basically for people who are already working in libraries and want to get a little bit more training. It's not to replace in any way an MLIS or that level of training, but it's basically to help you do what you're probably already doing, but do it with a little more formal training. And it also helps build cohort of people, of librarians, who are sort of at the same level and or even at different levels, and then there can be mentorship through that. It's initially was designed specifically for public library directors. It's sort of expanded beyond that because the thinking is the more trained staff we have, the better. So basically it's open to anybody working in a Vermont library. There's even a few people who are aspiring to or hoping to work in Vermont libraries and not there yet, but until we reach some capacity that we can't afford to offer it more broadly, we'll keep doing that because, as I said, the more people that get training and similar kinds of training, the better we're all going to be in Vermont libraries. So the other thing that's a little bit different than, the MLS or MLIS, besides the fact that, of course, it's not nearly as rigorous or as, long, but it's also designed to be very practical. I mean, like, for example, we have the cataloging course coming up. It's not really important that if you're trying to run a small library and you're a tiny staff and maybe even part-time hours, you don't need to know all the in-depth, cataloging things that somebody might do if they were cataloging full-time. But you do need to just have practical ways of making sure that your books are getting entered correctly in your own catalog. So, we are trying to make it practical and skills that you're actually going to be using and make your workflow better and more consistent. So that's sort of the idea of it. Okay, so I'm going to go over the requirements and then also just share some ideas of ways that you can get your credits fulfilled. So there's a registration process. It's actually called on the website an application. It's not like you need to meet a certain standard to get accepted or anything like that. So it's a little bit of a misnomer, and at some point we'll probably revise that application. Just there's a lot going on and a lot of revamping of this particular program, so we're taking things kind of one step at a time. But for now, that's the registration process. Just fill that out, and that'll mean you're registered in the program. And at any point after you've filled that out, any classes you take after that will count toward your certification. And that is even if you haven't heard back that, yes, we got your, your registration, a formal letter saying that. I can look back and see the date that you started, so we can always do that retroactively. I'll talk about this more later, but I'm trying to have it be 2 times a year when we go through that process. So people can sign up any time of the year, but just so that I'm not constantly processing, like whenever somebody happens to sign up, have it be sort of like semesters, like we're doing an orientation now, and then we'll do one again in the fall, and try to get on that twice a year schedule for both people signing up for the program and processing the classes that you've taken. So more about that later. There's also a form on the website where you can submit your, sorry, my email is popping up on the screen. That's very distracting. I just stopped it. There's a form on the website, a link to a form on the website where you can submit your classes that you've taken, which again, we're going to do that on a schedule, but it's also something that you can keep on your own so that you're just keeping track of what you're taking And then twice a year, I will submit that into a transcript. More about that later. So those are the two links for that. And they're on our website. If you go to the Vermont Department of Libraries website, there's a continuing education page and then a separate page for the certificate program. So you'll see all that there. So again, this is a little bit, I didn't articulate this quite right on the slide, because registration is basically open anytime, but December and August is when I'm going to look in and see what people have signed up since last time I went and looked, so that I'm not constantly adding people. But again, I can see that when you've signed up. So if you've signed up and I haven't processed it yet, I can still give you credit for those classes. Does that make sense? If there's questions, you can unmute yourself and ask, or type in the chat box. Any questions on that timeline? Okay, looks like we're good there. Okay, so the certificate is 150 credits total, and this is a little pie chart that tells you what the designation of those credits are. It sounds like a pretty high number. That's because each of the core courses are worth 25 credits. And again, that's a holdover from when they used to be 5 days long, so that was kind of an intuitive 5 credits for each day. We're still doing that, even though the core courses are much shorter. We're still just assigning them 25 credits to keep it consistent. So those 4 areas that are required are collection development, information services, which is reference, cataloging, and administration. So we will offer those classes every year. And then there's also some other ways that we'll talk about later where you can get all of the classes but administration. We're requiring that the administration class be done through us just because it's more specific to Vermont small libraries than some of the other classes are. The technology can be a variety of things. It can be working with Clover. It can be working with Overdrive. It can be making a website. There's actually quite a few places that you can do online webinars that will fulfill those requirements. Same with the electives. That can be a variety of things. It could either be workshops given by us or webinars through various other things, or attending other workshops or conferences. And we'll talk more about how to get those credits later as well. And this pie chart is on our website as well. If you ever forget, what the breakdown of the credits is, you can look on the website and see that. Okay, so here are some different ways that you can earn your continuing education units, or CEUs. So of course, any of our classes, the core ones, or any of the workshops, a lot of our workshops will fall into the elective category, but certain ones of them will be specific to some of the others. In the core areas, if you take something beyond the core course in cataloging or collection development, those would probably best go into electives, because that way you'll get your complete number quicker. One way to get the core courses outside of our department is the Idaho Commission for Libraries. They have a site called the Able Library, not to be confused with our Able Library here, but it just happens to have that same name. And they have a sequence of courses in cataloging, reference, and collection development that you can, if you do the whole sequence, and you'll get a certificate. And then if you send me that, that will count as your core course. Web Junction has a lot of webinars. I send those out usually at the beginning of the month, and then also you can anytime during the month go on their site and see what they offer. They archive most or all of them. Tons of different topics there, and those are free. So those are a really good place to get electives. There's a question, will I share this at the end? It's going to be on our website, so all the slides and actually the whole webinar will be on there, so you can look at the slides then. ALA, Public Library Association, often has webinars. Booklist has free webinars. There are some webinars that I will send out sometimes that have a fee. Sometimes it's not that big of a fee of $50 or something, but if you don't want to pay for them, there are ways to get this whole certificate without paying at all. So it's just if something one of the paid ones looked great to you and you had it in your budget, then I send those out as options, but don't feel like you have to pay for anything. The whole idea of this is for it to support you guys without breaking your budget. So you can get some credits for conference attendance. There's a VLA conference in May. There's the Association of Small and Rural Libraries is coming in September, or if you go to ALA or a variety of other conferences, those will work. And then there's other options that people come up with sometimes. And if you're going to take something and it's not from us, Web Junction, Idaho, or ALA or conference, just let me know ahead of time and make sure that it would count for credit ahead of time. And the other thing to check ahead of time, if there's any question, just check which category it'll be in. So if you're really needing your technology credits, make sure you check ahead of time that it'll count for that, for example. And then a lot of the places will send a certificate, just email a certificate, and if you can just send a copy of that to me, that would be great. If they don't, if you have like a confirmation email that says you were registered, even better if it says that you attended. There's some leeway on that because there's just a variety of ways that people indicate that someone has attended their workshop. So do the best you can on that, and if you ever just can't find anything at all, I'm going to believe you. We'll go with the benefit of the doubt on that. So, but usually there is some sort of written certificate. So again, we talked about the 150 credits. They have to be completed within 5 years of when you register. So that's a pretty long time. Most people finish now that this program has got going again. I think it'll be easier to finish within 5 years. For a while, it sort of was dormant. So there's some people that it's been longer than that. But before it went dormant, people had no problem, I think, finishing within 5 years. I think it's easier now too because we're offering more online options like the Idaho Commission for Libraries things. I know in the past it's difficult to get away and come to Barrie or to wherever the workshops are, particularly if they're long and if you work in a small library with a small staff. Somebody asked, what's the least amount of time you've seen someone finish? I haven't really been here long enough to have a definitive answer on that because I came in last May and it had just gotten restarted, I think, in March, and there were a lot of people kind of rushing to finish then. But I do think that there was a person that finished within maybe between March and now. But I don't know that for sure because I don't have all the information on what he might have been doing before I was here. But I think, those Idaho courses, you could do them probably if you all in one day. They're like, I think maybe each one is an hour or something. I'm not really sure. I've sort of scanned through them. But then you need to think about, if you want to dedicate that amount of time, and then also if you spread it out more and do it slower, you might get more out of them. But that's just totally up to you. There's no rule about like you can't do it too fast. So yeah, again, just if you want to do in-person courses, I guess the only thing is the administration class, which is required to do here at our department, and that's only offered once a year. So that'll be in the fall, and so you'd have to at least have one fall in there to get that administration class in. But after that, if you started with that, you could probably just do everything really succinctly if you wanted to. So letters of completion are going to be sent after I review materials twice a year. So they'll be sent in January and August. And then the letter of completion proves that you're done. The actual certificate, which is a nice paper and with the Vermont State logo and everything on it, those are given out at the VLA conference in May. And if people don't go to the conference, I'll just mail them. But it's a nice ceremony. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but it's always just nice to see what people have finished, and you always get a lot of cheers from your colleagues and stuff. So that will, if you can do that, it's a nice thing. So the only thing with the letters, if somebody needs a letter because they're applying for a job or they want to go to their trustees and advocate for a raise or something like that, I can always do it, case by case, anytime really, mid-year. So there's a question, are there notes that can be sent through email? It's probably easiest if you just ask me specific questions and I can answer you individually. Or if you have notes, if you have questions at the end of this, we can try to get to them. I'm not sure exactly what kind of notes you mean, so if you want to elaborate on that, maybe I can answer more clearly. Somebody asked also, is there a practical requirement doing hours at another library? No. Most of the people that are in this program are already working in libraries, so it kind of takes care of that. And yeah, again, that's something like you often have to do for an MLS, but since most people, it's a really practical application of what you're already doing, and increasing your skills on that, we don't require that. Good question. So the required core courses, as I said, they used to be 5 days, and then just this past year we offered each of them one time, and they were only 1 day, and it just didn't seem like enough. So our new thing, and again, this is in flux because we're continuing to tweak it, but what we're trying for the next sequence of core courses is 1 day and then a follow-up day a few weeks later. And the way we have the first one we're doing that with is cataloging. It's a half day the second time, and in that case cataloging is such a practical thing. It's going to be like more theoretical the first day, and then you'll go home with some like a project homework kind of thing to do, come back and share out on that. And I think there may be other ones that are like that. The public library administration one, there was so much content for that it was just really hard to cram it all in 1 day. And it also, we like the idea of like you getting a chance to go home and reflect on it and try some things out maybe that you learned, and then come back and we can sort of hit on things that you might have felt like, oh, I wish you had talked about this at your shop. And we can also look at questions, or evaluations that day, like is there something that you wish that we had talked about, and we could hit some of that the second day. So again, they will earn 25 units. And then here's our, again, tentative, oh no, this is the way it's going to be for this next year. If it doesn't work, we'll tweak it. But cataloging is going to be in the spring. And it's already scheduled, actually. This cataloging is April 25th and May 23rd. And then reference is also going to be, information services or reference is also going to be in the spring. That's going to be probably 2 required things and then an extra third one that you can do for an elective if you want. We don't have a date for that yet, but it'll be in the spring. Administration will be in the fall, and collection development will be in the fall. We tried doing those in the winter this time just to make sure that we got them in, and it was pretty stressful just looking at the weather and hoping people could make it here. And so we're just not going to have the core courses in the winter anytime. So there's a question, does the Idaho ABLE course remove the need to take any of these? All except, so the Idaho courses can be taken for any of the core courses except the administration course. So yes, if you do those Idaho courses in the other 3 core areas and then send me the certificate, you're set, and you'll get your credit for the core courses. So besides the core courses, the way that the credits work is 1 credit, 1 contact hour equals 1 credit. So if you do a 4-hour workshop, you get 4 credits. If you do an all-day one and there's an hour off for lunch, it would be minus the hour for lunch. So usually when we will post them, and we'll say on there how many units it is and in which category. And there's a question, do people in Vermont need to travel out of state to take classes? No, this is all, it's all either in-state or online, unless you went to a conference, but you wouldn't need to go to a conference to meet the requirements. If you happen to go and it was out of state, it would count, but there's no requirement to do anything out of state to do this. So the independent study or embedded CD is something that we're experimenting with a little bit, and I think I have one case of what we're going to try right now. We haven't actually gotten started on it yet, but the thought on that is if you have some project that you're doing that doesn't fit neatly into any of the categories we already discussed, it might count for credit just get in touch with me and we'll figure out a way to maybe formalize it a little bit more than, you know, and come up with like a lesson plan kind of, so that we can have, see exact a curriculum, what you're doing, and then some outcomes afterwards. So in the case that we're experimenting with right now, it's actually somebody kind of tweaking what some work that she's doing at her library and making it more into a curriculum and evaluating what she's done and that kind of thing. So that's a little bit case by case and somewhat experimental at this point. But I did want to put that out there because there could be some project that you're doing that would be perfect for this, and there's no need for you to duplicate your efforts if you're already doing something that we could turn into something that would earn you credits. So yeah, the question about the administration course that we recently had last December, yes, if you did that, you're done with your administration requirement. Anything that you've done since you signed up, it counts. So if you guys, if any of the people that are on here now that are already registered have taken one of the core courses that was only 1 day, even though we're now making them a little longer, your 1 day counts. So there's not going to be any retroactive, like going back and like your class wasn't long enough, so you need to add more. If you've taken it already, you're good. Okay, the question about the ABLE sequence. Yeah, I know the math doesn't really work on the ABLE sequence. So just for our purposes, we're calling it 25 credits because we're counting them as core courses. So in that case, it doesn't work hour per hour. The same way like when we offer them in person, it's not really 25 hours. Again, that's because those courses are traditionally 25 hours of credit because they used to be that long. So yeah, I hope that makes sense. I know that is confusing and I've gotten that question before. But yes, if you do the whole sequence in any of those topics in ABLE and show me that you send me the certificate, then you're done, even though it wasn't really 25 hours. Good question. And so then submitting the courses, again, this is just to kind of make the flow of it a little bit more streamlined. If you can keep what you've done, keep a record of all the courses and workshops that you've done, and then just send them in twice a year, so not as you're doing them. So we're gonna, if you can send them in the month of June, and then I will look at them all from everybody and update their transcripts the next month, and then the same thing will happen in the winter. So in November, send them in again. I'll process them in December. So does anyone have questions about that? That seemed confusing, and last time we had an orientation, and we haven't quite got on that pattern yet because I still get a lot of, like, I took one class last week, but emails, which is fine. I'm just filing them away and keeping them. But that's the idea. And again, if somebody really needs their transcript, I can fit it in. So none of this is set in stone. But that's the intent, is for it to be on a flow of being twice a year submissions and twice a year updating of transcripts. So it's not just a constant flow. The question of if you can't make it to a class, do you mean the core classes, Michaela, or you know what, it might be easiest if okay, so the core courses, they won't come up again from us for a year. But if you missed one of the classes that's also offered through Idaho, you could do that. So anyone but the administration, if you missed the in-person class, you could do that, or you could just work on other things and take it again the next year. So that's really, I think, about all of my things on a sort of overview of like how to get your credits and what the requirements are. Are there questions? You can unmute yourselves, and if you have questions now, it might be easier to just talk if people have questions, or type, that's fine too. Okay, so somebody's, okay. You can definitely, Karen, you can definitely take the Rutland, the volunteer class in Rutland. Is that the one you mean? Yes, so sure. So there's registration links on our website. So I'm gonna, my last couple of slides here are just like upcoming workshops, but just to be clear on that, like if you go to the continuing education page on the website, they all have links that'll take you to a registration page. And, you know, of course, everything's free, so just you can register, and it does help if you register for something and you can't come, if you let me know, and then I can unregister you, and then it just helps with our, you know, prep for any like handouts or anything, but that's easy to do. Mary, your question is change arsal date. I'm not sure what. Oh, yes, for the webinar about that. Is that what you mean? Yeah, it must be what you mean. So yes, there was going to be a webinar about the grants to attend the Association of Rural and Small Libraries conference in September. So the department is giving grants for that. We are not quite ready with the paperwork on and everything for it. So it was going to be next Monday. It's now going to be February 20th instead. And that will also, that webinar will be on our website if you can't attend in person. Also, I think I daunted some people a little bit by saying there was going to be a webinar about this. It's not that this application process is going to be terribly arduous. It's like a page long, or maybe 2 pages long. One of the pages is like your contact information. So it's not going to be that hard. I just wanted to give people a chance to ask questions about it, because there are going to be a couple different levels of grants. And so, you know, if people have questions about which they should apply for or whatever, I just want to have some time in person, virtually in person, to answer questions about it. But if you can't do it in person, you know, or live webinar, it will be archived, and then you can also just email me questions too. But you could share with your colleagues if you hear, you know, people thinking, well, why does there need to be a webinar about it? It's really not that. It's not like an intimidating process. It's just basically to answer questions. And it is February 20th. And I'm gonna, while I'm talking, get out my calendar to make sure I'm telling you the right time. Just a second, I'm pulling that up right now. So yeah, it is now February 20th from 1 to 2 in the afternoon. And again, it might not really even be that long, but that'll be the webinar, and it will be archived. We're hoping also that we can get the application out before that, so people have a chance to look at it, and if they have questions based on that, after looking at it, they can ask those questions. The question is, I was a volunteer coordinator for 10 years. Let me think about that, Karen, and you and I can maybe talk offline about that. If you're a volunteer coordinator, it might just not be, you know, you maybe don't need the class, but we can talk later. Now I'm just going through the chats to see if I'm missing anything. Okay, so some things we have. Oh yeah, so I'm sorry, you mentioned the change of the date, of course, because it's on the slide here. I need to edit the slide. I missed that whole thing. So yeah, the volunteer classes are coming up at Rutland and St. J. Then we have summer reading workshops. This is an example, like the credit thing of the summer reading workshop is 9:30 to 3:30. But it's probably 5 hours of credit, because I think there's an hour for lunch. If there's less than an hour, then it would be more credits. But that just as an example of how the credits work. The opioid Narcan in your library thing is going to happen in 4 places. That's Laura Keenan and somebody from a medical company that I don't remember the name of right now. But they're going to talk about safe usage of it, and I think you probably saw Laura's email about that yesterday on the listserv. And again, you can sign up for any of these on our website. There's a Department of Children and Families roundtable here. The marketing class is going to be actually a sequence. We don't have the other 2 dates yet, but this is going to be a general one, and then we're going to have 2 shorter workshops on specific projects and marketing for those. The assistive technology one, I think, is going to be really great. It came out of that, one of the things that I shared maybe about a week ago that it was one of the workshops that had a fee for it, and it looked like a really great workshop, but it did cost money. And just about a minute after I sent it, I thought, I'm sure we could do that here, because we have Vin Lavoti, who's really very informed about that kind of thing, and he's actually going to do this and bring in somebody from another department that also works with the actual devices that people use. So that's going to be very cool, I think, on the 29th of April, and they will have the devices here for people to try hands-on and instruct, in that way. And then here's the next core course is cataloging, as I mentioned, and then at the bottom there is the link to where you can see any of the upcoming classes. And again, any questions you have, you can always write me and I will let you know. But we try to get, you have a short description of the class and a link to register for it and how many credits and which category it'll be in on the announcement of the class. So are there any other questions? I'm gonna, there's an evaluation through Project Outcome for the webinar, and you can take that link and do it electronically if you so desire. And I think that's all, unless there are questions.